Every few months, a new study drops claiming they've finally cracked the happiness code. Drink more water, sleep 8 hours, be grateful, cold showers, meditate for 10 minutes. And none of it is exactly wrong, but none of it explains why some people just seem genuinely okay. Not performing contentment, not grinding toward some future version of themselves that will finally be satisfied, just actually, quietly content. While the rest of us add more things to our morning routine and somehow feel worse. I went down this rabbit hole for a long time. Read the research, the actual studies, not the medium summaries. And what I found was that genuinely happy people, not the Instagram kind, not the motivational speaker kind, the real kind, are doing something structurally different from what we're typically told to do. Not harder, different. And in some cases, the opposite of what we expect. So here are 6 of those differences. If you're thinking about skipping to your favorite number, don't. These are in order, not for drama, because secret 1 is the one almost everyone misunderstands, and if you skip it, secret 6 won't click. The first secret sounds like the least surprising thing on the internet. It's not. Secret 1. They practice gratitude, but not the way you think. You've heard this. You've heard it enough that the word has started to feel hollow. And here's what I want to say. The problem is not that gratitude doesn't work. The problem is that almost everyone is doing it in a way that's scientifically designed to stop working as fast as possible. The standard advice is write 3 things you're grateful for every morning. And if you've actually tried this consistently, you know what happens by week 3. You write health, family, coffee. You feel roughly nothing. And you start to think that either you're broken or gratitude is just a lie that sounds good in a quote. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain is a novelty-detecting machine. It evolved to flag new information and filter out the familiar. This is called habituation. When you write the same gratitude list every day, your brain processes it the same way it processes the hum of your refrigerator. Background noise. The words become wallpaper. You're technically being grateful, but neurologically, nothing is happening. Dr. Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology at UPenn, not some wellness influencer, ran a specific study on this. And the gratitude intervention that actually moved the needle long-term wasn't a list, it was a letter. Here's how it works. You write a detailed letter to someone who meaningfully impacted your life. A teacher, a parent, a college friend, someone you never properly thanked. You write it out fully. You include specifics, the moment, what they said, what it changed. Then you call them, and you read it to them out loud. Not email, not text, out loud, live. The happiness boost from this single exercise, according to Seligman's research, lasts for weeks, not days, and people report it as one of the most emotionally significant experiences of their adult lives, both the person giving it and the one receiving it. One letter, weeks of effect. Here's the psychology behind why. Specificity creates meaning. I'm grateful for my family doesn't activate anything, but I'm grateful for the thing my uncle said at Thanksgiving in 2011 when I was failing out of school and he was the only person who didn't treat me like a disaster. That activates emotion, memory, and identity. That's the difference between abstract appreciation and actual gratitude. Genuinely happy people aren't grateful in vague ways. They go back and find the specific things, the specific people, the specific moments, and they go there emotionally. It's uncomfortable. It's also the only version that works past the first 2 weeks. There's something else here that'll matter later. Genuinely happy people are consistently willing to be uncomfortable when the discomfort is meaningful. We're going to come back to that. Secret 2. They've stopped fighting hedonic adaptation. I want you to do something. Think of the thing you most want right now. The raise, the apartment, the relationship, the body, the career shift, whatever your version of that would fix things is. Got it? Now. Studies consistently show that within 3 to 6 months of getting it, your baseline happiness returns to almost exactly where it was before you got it. Sometimes less than 3 months. This is hedonic adaptation, and it is absolutely ruthless. Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell's landmark research from 1978, and this has been replicated many times since, showed that lottery winners, on average, were no happier than control groups within a year of winning. People who became paraplegics reported returning to near baseline happiness within a similar time frame. We adapt to everything. The human brain is astonishingly good at making the extraordinary ordinary. And the worst part, the more we pursue happiness through acquisition and achievement, the faster the adaptation happens. Because we get better at wanting the next thing before we've even finished enjoying the current one. Most people's response to understanding hedonic adaptation is to either despair, which is understandable, or to go faster. Get more, upgrade sooner, move to the next milestone before the current one wears off. This is what researchers call the hedonic treadmill. You sprint, you go nowhere. You exhaust yourself. Genuinely happy people have stepped off the treadmill, not out of resignation, but out of strategy. They've learned two things. First, you can slow down adaptation through a practice called savoring. This is not passive enjoyment. It is the active, deliberate act of interrupting the familiar. It means going back to a meal you love and ordering slowly. It means sitting with a good conversation without reaching for your phone. It means noticing the thing you've already got, really noticing it, before moving to the next thing. Savoring works because it short-circuits the automatic process of habituation. Second, and this is from Cornell psychologist Thomas Gilovich's research, people adapt to material purchases dramatically faster than to experiences. Because experiences connect to memory, identity, and relationships, and memory is actually revisable. You can re-experience an experience in your mind. You can't re-experience a couch. So genuinely happy people redirect spending and attention, less toward things, more toward experiences. Not because it's virtuous, but because it actually compounds. Things depreciate. Memories and relationships and skills don't. Secret 3. Relationships are non-negotiable, and they treat them that way. Here's the data, and I want you to sit with this for a second. Harvard University started a longitudinal study on health and happiness in 1938. They tracked the same group of men across their entire lives. Medical records, psychological interviews, family histories, for over 80 years. It became one of the longest ongoing research projects in history. When they analyzed what actually predicted long, healthy, happy lives, it wasn't income, it wasn't cholesterol, it wasn't education level, it wasn't career status. It was the quality of their close relationships at midlife. The single strongest predictor of how people aged, physically and emotionally, was whether they had warm, satisfying relationships with other people. Not the number of relationships, the quality. This distinction is critical. The people with a few deeply satisfying relationships consistently outperformed people with large but shallow networks. One person you can call at 2 in the morning, someone who will actually pick up, who has actually seen you at your worst and still calls back, is worth more in measurable health and happiness outcomes than 500 social media followers or a full calendar of networking events. Genuinely happy people understand this, and they invest accordingly. They show up. They ask questions and then actually listen to the answers. They remember things. They send the strange text that says, "I don't know why, but I thought of you today." Not as a social performance, but because they actually did think of you, and they said so. They don't collect relationships, they maintain them. And here's the thing I'll add that the data implies but doesn't say directly. The biggest threat to close relationships in 2026 is not distance or conflict. It's ambient distraction. Sitting in the same room as someone you love while you're both slightly somewhere else. Genuinely happy people have made some kind of implicit deal with themselves. When someone I care about is actually present with me, I'm going to actually be present with them. This is not a digital wellness hack. This is how you keep the relationships that the Harvard data says are the most important thing in your life. Secret 4. They find flow, and they find it every single day. In the 1990s, psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi published research on what he called flow states. If you've encountered this idea, you might have filed it under, Interesting concept I'll think about someday. I'd like to upgrade it to probably the most underrated psychological intervention available to you at no cost. Flow is a state of total absorption in a task, where time distorts, self-consciousness disappears, and you're operating right at the edge of your capability. You felt this. Maybe while playing a sport, or writing something difficult, or cooking a complicated meal, or doing something with your hands that required your full attention. You look up and 2 hours have gone, and you feel a kind of tired but alive that's completely different from the tired and empty you get from scrolling for 2 hours. Csikszentmihalyi's research found that people who experience flow frequently report significantly higher life satisfaction, meaning, and energy over time. Not happiness in the "I'm smiling right now" sense, happiness in the deep, durable, "this is what my life is actually about" sense. The formula for flow has a specific structure. The challenge has to slightly exceed your current ability. Not by a mile, by a step. The zone is narrow. Too easy and you get bored and disengage. Too hard and you get anxious and lock up. Right at that edge, that's where absorption happens. Genuinely happy people have identified at least one activity that reliably puts them there. They've also learned to adjust the difficulty when life changes, to make the familiar challenging again, or to scale back when they're depleted. And they protect time for it. Not as a hobby, not as self-care, as something closer to neurological maintenance for meaning. Here's the trap that most people fall into: passive entertainment. Netflix, YouTube, social media, these produce pleasurable distraction, not flow. They're not bad, but they don't compound. They don't create memories or skills or a sense of identity. Flow does. And while pleasure from distraction fades with every viewing, skill-based activities get better the more you do them, which means flow gets easier to access, which means meaning becomes more available. It compounds in a way that passive consumption simply doesn't. If you genuinely can't name an activity that produces flow for you right now, that's important information. That's not a personality quirk. That's a gap. And finding what fills it is worth treating as an actual priority. Secret 5. They've chosen meaning over happiness, and that's exactly why they're happier. This is the one that broke my brain when I first understood it. The research suggests that genuinely happy people don't optimize for happiness. They optimize for meaning. And when you orient your life around something that feels meaningful, something you'd care about even if it were difficult, the happiness shows up as a byproduct. But when you chase happiness directly, you tend to get neither. Viktor Frankl made this observation in one of the most extreme contexts imaginable. He was a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps and wrote about it in Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most important books of the 20th century and still, somehow, not widely assigned in schools. Frankl observed that the people who survived psychologically, not just physically, were those who had preserved some sense of meaning, even in conditions of absolute deprivation. He concluded that happiness cannot be pursued directly. It must ensue. It is a consequence of a life lived in service of something beyond itself. Seligman included this as the M in PERMA, his evidence-based model for well-being. Meaning is defined specifically as belonging to and serving something you believe is bigger than yourself. Family, community, creative work, a cause, an idea you've dedicated yourself to. The specific form varies enormously, but the necessity of it doesn't. Genuinely happy people have answered, at least provisionally, at least approximately, the question, what am I actually for? Not perfectly, not permanently, provisionally. And that answer functions as a North Star for decisions that would otherwise feel arbitrary. What to spend time on? What to say no to? Which trade-offs are worth making? What's worth being uncomfortable for? And we're back to Secret 1 again. People without this tend to optimize for comfort. Comfort tends to produce safety. Safety tends to produce routine. Routine without meaning tends to produce a low-grade, persistent sense that something is missing. Which is true. Something is missing. And the answer to what is it starts with the answer to what am I for? You don't have to figure this out today, but you have to start asking the question and taking the answers seriously. Secret 6. They process negative emotions. They don't avoid them. This was the one that surprised me most, and I think it's the most practically useful. I assumed going in that genuinely happy people must have found some way to feel good most of the time, some kind of emotional management system that kept the bad stuff from landing too hard. I was wrong. The research is unambiguous on this. Genuinely happy people experience negative emotions at roughly the same frequency as everyone else. The difference is in what they do when those emotions arrive. Here's the neurological background. Our brains have what's called a negativity bias, an evolutionary feature, not a bug. Threats mattered more than opportunities for survival, so our brains evolved to register negative experiences more powerfully than positive ones. One bad interaction can outweigh 5 good ones. One failure can psychologically overshadow 10 successes. This is not weakness or pessimism, this is hardware, and it runs in everyone. Unhappy people tend to respond to negative emotions in one of 2 ways. They suppress them, push them down, perform fine, keep moving, which creates pressure that eventually finds a way out, usually sideways. Or they ruminate, replay the same bad experience on a loop, which is basically suffering with no additional information generated. Suppression and rumination are the 2 most common coping strategies, and they're both catastrophic at scale. Genuinely happy people do something different. They allow the emotion to be present, fully, without amplifying it or dismissing it. There's a practice that researchers at UCLA studied. They called it emotional labeling, or affect labeling, where you put specific language to what you're feeling. Not, I feel bad. Specifically, I feel anxious about the conversation I have to have tomorrow. I feel a particular kind of grief about this. This is shame. What the UCLA research showed, and this has been replicated, is that this simple act significantly reduces the subjective intensity of the emotion. It moves processing from the amygdala, which reacts, to the prefrontal cortex, which thinks. You go from being flooded to having a conversation with yourself. And then, and this is what genuinely happy people have learned to do that almost no one talks about, they ask what the emotion is pointing to. Anxiety usually means something important is at stake. Sadness usually means something that mattered was lost. Anger usually means something felt unjust. These emotions aren't malfunctions, they're signals. Uncomfortable, sometimes overwhelming, but specific. And genuinely happy people have gotten comfortable asking the signal what it's trying to tell them. They are not happier because they feel less. They are happier because they've stopped fighting their own internal experience and started using it. So, 6 secrets. Not hacks, not morning routines, actual changes in how to orient toward experience. Specific, uncomfortable gratitude. Stepping off the hedonic treadmill and redirecting toward experiences and meaning. Deep relationships maintained actively. Flow built into your week as something non-negotiable. A provisional answer to what you're actually for. And the willingness to sit with negative emotions, label them, and learn from them instead of suppressing or endlessly replaying them. These are connected. The gratitude visit requires discomfort. Stepping off the treadmill requires meaning. Meaning requires relationships and a sense of purpose. Flow requires that you care enough about something to get good at it. Processing emotions requires the kind of psychological safety that deep relationships provide. They're not 6 separate tips. They're one system. If you're looking for the one thing to do this week, not all 6, just one, here's my answer. Write the letter. Pick the person. Do the gratitude visit the uncomfortable way. Read it to them out loud. Not because it will make you happy as a direct outcome, because it will teach you what specific gratitude actually feels like. And that feeling is the entry point for everything else on this list. If one of these 6 landed harder than the others, drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which one people hadn't heard before and which ones you're already doing. And if you want to go deeper on hedonic adaptation, PERMA, or Frankl specifically, I've linked the actual research below. Worth reading the sources directly. See you in the next one.